Hey, everybody, welcome back. Another episode of the Contrarians. We're going to take a look at the discography of Gillan, and I'm going to throw it over to Martin because he's in the hot seat again today with a contrarian pick for Gillan, and he's going to give us a little bit of the lowdown on why he's picking this record as the best or his favorite Gillan record. So I'm going to throw it over to Martin.
Yes, thanks, Marco. So, yeah, as Marco says, on our regular shows, what we do is one of us has a choice of an album that is possibly not the top choice in terms of these catalogs. And I definitely feel that way about Gillan, that I feel like I'm a little bit of a dark horse here. But before we get to that, just a little history of the band. Obviously, this is a band led by Ian Gillan. It's not the Ian Gillan band. It's not the weird fusiony proggy band that he had before with Clear Air Turbulence and Scarabus and all that kind of stuff. Child in Time, with all those Deep Purple guys kind of going off on a tangent, doing weird stuff in the late '70s. No, this is actually a fairly heavy metal band. I always call them the punk Deep Purple. An amazing band. They only made what is it here? Six albums? 1, 2, 3, something like that. I think so. We'll find out as we go through them. But fairly heavy band, came around to the new wave of British heavy metal. They're participating in all that. I always consider them a new wave of British heavy metal band. They had lots of like picture sleeve singles and stuff and little gatefold singles and neat artwork. So they kind of fit in that whole oeuvre. They were on Virgin Records. So just to give you a quick rundown of the catalog, the first thing they put out is this album, Gillan. This is otherwise known as the Japanese album. And there's gatefold. This is the nice thick Japanese cardboard, right? Then they have a few lineups. It is cool to have that. And then we go on to Mr. Universe, which is their second album. Few lineup changes. This is considered a classic. My favorite Gillan song of all time is on this, Mr. Universe. When they come out of that break, that solo break, and John McCoy just starts laying it down on the bass. Amazing, amazing. One of my favorite rock and roll moments of all time. Check it out late in the song, Mr. Universe on this. So that's the second album. Then we get Glory Road. This was the first one that came out in Canada. And my copy is a Canadian copy. I bought this. This might even be the first Gillan album I actually ever owned. And then this had some advanced singles. I remember one of them came with a patch. I think the Sleeping on the Job single. There's the band on the back. Ian signed that one for me. We had a hotel interview one day. And then it came out with this one, which I bought the import copy of. This is a Future Shock. They're what are we up to? 4 albums now. This is the one that had the booklet in it, like that, with all the cool artwork and the weird band shots. So that's your UK issue of Future Shock with all that in it. Future Shock, sorry. And then we have Double Trouble, which is a double album with a live album added on as a sort of bonus. This is my copy of For Gillan Fans Only, just a rarities thing that came with, I believe, Glory Road. And then at the end, I have this framed up, but the last one they ever made was Magic. So there's some neat Gillan ticket stubs, Ian Gillan's ticket stub there too. And there's Scarabus, an early Ian Gillan, well, the last Ian Gillan band album before he became Gillan. And it's funny, just another quick story. When we had that interview, this was the current album. I think it was the current one that we were talking about. Maybe we were talking about something else. Maybe Gillan's in or something. Anyways, this is a Toolbox. And I remember saying to him, is this really a Gillan album and all that? And I go, because it's just got Gillan up there with your logo and that. And he looks at it and goes, oh, I never noticed that. No, it's just an Ian Gillan solo album. So here we are, we're all fretting about, do they have one of these messy later albums like a Richie Blackmore's Rainbow with Stranger in Us All? No, they don't. This is not a Gillan album. Doesn't sound like a Gillan album. So no, this is a tight catalog that basically goes from, I think, what is that, 1978 for the Japanese album up to, I think it's 1982 for the last
82
one.
Or 83, yeah.
For Magic. So it's a very tight catalog of these albums. So that's your history of the Gillan band. Just quickly, Bernie Torme on guitar. He gets replaced by Yannick Gers. Talking classic lineup here because the first one has a couple different guys. But John McCoy on bass, great guy, great bass sound, also songwriter. Colin Towns, keyboard genius. He writes a lot of the songs as well. He's the guy that makes them sound almost like a demented heavy metal punk Deep Purple Doors. And then you've got Mick Underwood, an amazing drummer on drums, really cool, a lot of cool snare work from Mick. That's kind of his forte. But in terms of my favorite Gillan album, I went with this one, Double Trouble. Now, the reason I went with this is I really like the personality. I think this one really hangs together, and it's the one that really feels like the most daring and punky-ish and most frenzied and more compact and noisiest, all together. It's the one where I feel there's a lot of super Gillanness to it. Mr. Universe, I like a lot. I would say hands down, Double Trouble is over Magic for me, because Magic sounds like a little bit of like a we're reaching album. We don't know what to write. Let's put some stuff together. Maybe the bad blood is starting to form. This is a band famously with a lot of bad blood because of financial issues, not making a lot of money, spending a lot of money, being crazy. They're all pretty crazy guys. But I would say Future Shock and Glory Road have too many peaks and valleys for me, and they're clearly the two that are behind. But what I love about this record, so they're doing pretty good. It went number 12 on the charts. Nightmare as a single went to number 36. Restless went to number 25. First of all, I'm going to absolutely ignore the live album that comes with this. It's dead to me. I don't care. I'm not comparing at all with that. An atrocious lineup. It's only got 6 songs. It's like a made in Japan or A Song Remains the Same, or the worst of all of these, Rainbow on Stage. But yeah, No Laughing in Heaven's pretty cool song. No Easy Way is a pretty cool song. These are both not great Gillan songs. And then Trouble, hate it. Mutually Assured Destruction, no fan. If You Believe Me, absolutely no fan. It's like a bluesy gospel thing. And then they're covering New Orleans. So the live album, horrible. I never go there. But the studio album, love it to death. Starts out with I'll Rip Your Spine Out, an awesome heavy one. Really cool grinding groove to it. It's got 2 Colin Towns keyboard solos in it. Really cool. Restless is one of these punky, frenzied ones. It's poppy, but it's still stomping, and it just has that frenzy of this band. Men of War is like a proggy mellow one, but then it picks up. It's got kind of an odd construction to it. Strange chords. Ian's just singing like a maniac. He's a screaming mad dog all over this album, and which I really love. Sunbeam. So ending side 2, another super heavy Sabbathy one, something you don't really expect from them. It's got this light, airy fairy sunbeam. The sun's coming out lyric, yet it's so heavy and so sludgy and grinding. Nightmare kicking off side 2. They do these poppy things, and I'm totally fine with it when they do it. But this is actually my favorite of all the Gillan kind of pop metal songs. Because again, I think there's so much atmosphere because of the dirty, distorted, cool production on this record. Hadley Bop Bop is one of these heavy, weird ones. It's got a real kind of stomping 4/4 grinding, Take No Prisoners kind of punk Deep Purple grind to it. Reminds me of those songs on Mr. Universe that kind of go to the same place. To me, this is the spiritual air of the Mr. Universe album. Life Goes On is my second favorite Gillan song of all time, after Mr. Universe. It's heavy with that weird beat where Mick is hitting the tom-tom instead of the snare. And it's snare, then tom, then snare, then tom. Great changes in it. And then it closes off with Born to Kill. This is a cool, you could almost write a thesis on Gillan songs like this, but it fits in with Mr. Universe, these mellow, really cool, emotional, thoughtful epics with still a lot of noise to them. But there's Mr. Universe, there's Fighting Man, there's On the Rocks, and then there's this one, Born to Kill. And this has a lot of changes in it. It's 9 minutes and 28 seconds long, but it's cool to see them put one of these epics on here. So again, there's a certain charm to Mr. Universe, which I put it very, very close to this album. But again, there's some peaks and valleys. There's 2 or 3 songs I'm not a huge fan of on Mr. Universe. This one, I've just bought into the whole process. Also forgot to mention, this is the first one of the band of the 2 that they made with Yannick Gers as the guitarist. Yannick, of course, is the famous Iron Maiden guitarist. He's coming to this band. from White Spirit. I think just White Spirit directly to this. He only writes one song on it, but basically everything's Ian Gillan on lyrics, and Colin Towns writes a lot. Colin Towns and John McCoy. There's your band shot of the guys there. So there you go. That's what I will pick as my favorite Gillan album. And Marco, tell me how I'm wrong.
Yeah, so just to clarify something right off the bat, in some of the research I did do, they only listed on some of the ranking lists 5 records. I think that might be because the first record had a different lineup and because there was some crossover with Mr. Universe. So I think there's only a handful of tracks that are unique to the Japanese record.
Yeah, they're all re-recorded with the new band on Mr. Universe.
Right. But, so like there's a few tracks that aren't on Mr. Universe, but for the most part, I think there's a lot of tracks that are kind of, that they are the same songs, but they were re-recorded. So there are some stuff in here where I say it's, ranked out of 5 records or whatever, but there are the 6, it is attributed to Gillan as a band, that record. But for example, like, this record that, Double Trouble that you picked, which is a great record. Like, honestly, I think Gillan is super underrated. I think most people should know about Gillan if they don't. I always look at Ian Gillan, like I always find that there was something happened between Born Again. I even mentioned this in our Deep Purple episode, between Born Again and Perfect Strangers, where I find his vocal performance, I guess he kind of just aged a little bit for me between those 2 records. So I always kind of look at his career pre and post. And this is like pre that happening, where I think his vocals and his performances are like peak with these records. And these are all great records. Glory Road, Mr. Universe, like they're awesome records. I think just subjectively, probably Mr. Universe is probably my favorite. I think it's probably the heaviest out of the 6 records, if you want to include the Japanese one even as well. One interesting piece of research that I found out about this record, and tell me if you've heard of this. Supposedly when Ian Gillan heard this record, he threw it out the window the first time that he heard this. Have you heard that before?
You know what? I think I've heard that about Born Again. So this might be like a mixed crossed messages thing. So that's all I can kind of remember. I could swear I've heard him say that about Born Again.
But you are contrarian. Like I think I had just mentioned, this was the second lowest charting of the 5 Gillan records, not including the Japanese one. Glory Road charted at number 2. This one charted at number 12, was the second lowest charting. Best ever albums has Glory Road at number 1, Mr. Universe number 2, 3 Future Shock, 4 Magic, 5 Double Trouble, and 6 Gillan.
Wow.
Okay. All Music gave the record 2 stars, but there's no actual critic review for it. So it's just rated as a 2-star record. And I do think it's interesting that you brought up the live part of it, because I was really going to hammer you hard for that one. But I do think a lot of the disdain for the record is the live part of it. A lot of the reviews that I did look up, user reviews, critic reviews, a lot of them said that either the production was just really bad, the performances weren't that great on the live part of it. Ian Gillan himself, here's just a couple of quotes about his records from Ian Gillan. So Magic, he says, I love Bluesy Blue Sea on this album. It's a phenomenal track, so different to anything we'd done previously at the time. This track has a blues bass, but very cosmic, very progressive. It's very futuristic for its time, very removed from what people expected of us. Demon Driver is a song that I used to love doing live. It was great fun to perform this on stage. There's a lot of good music on this record. Double
Marco,
Trouble.
let me just interject for a sec. I remember reading that Ian saying that about Bluesy Blue Sea. It's not bluesy. It's not progressive. It's not that different because they've done things like that on Double Trouble. It's just another one of these heavy, slow Sabbath kind of songs. It's an awesome song. He's right about that. It's an awesome song, but it's really a little bit like Life Goes On and Sunbeam actually.
But he goes on to cite a bunch of stuff that he liked from each record. And the only thing that he said he really liked from Double Trouble was No Laughing in Heaven sounds great on the live disc, which apparently is his favorite track. That's his favorite Gillan track that they ever recorded.
Yeah. And that song is just like a silly, casual, comedic song. It's not, the music isn't even that great on it. I mean, it's fine, but it's way down my list of favorite Gillan songs. But this is him almost like tossing off. It's funny, Ian, last time I talked to him, I said, I'd really like to write a book on this band. And he demurred and said, no, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to cooperate on that. I get asked that all the time. And, part of that is because he is really only thinking of the bad memories of the bad breakup of the band and him scooting over to Sabbath and the money problems and all that. He's not realizing that people love this band, and literally all I want to talk to him about is the music and the lyrics, right? People just love this band to death, and he's forgetting that part of it, and thinking that any question he's going to get asked about Gillan is going to take him to an uncomfortable place where, the business stuff didn't go down all that well and the friendships didn't go down all that well. But, fact of the matter is, like you say, I mean, I'm really delighted to see that you love this catalog. So anyways, go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Pretty much almost every record I like. Sea of Tranquility had Mr. Universe at number 1. Glory Road at number 2. And just to clarify this as well, so Sea of Tranquility ranked all of the Ian Gillan discography outside of Deep Purple and stuff like that. So he had Ian Gillan Band and all that stuff in here as well. So like, for example, the Japanese record was 3, Clear Air Turbulence was number 4, and Double Trouble was 5. Yeah. And actually the interesting quote that he had about the records was, he said, if you're only going to listen to one thing from Ian Gillan, listen to Glory Road. He said, if you have enough money to buy 2 records, get Mr. Universe and Glory Road. So his suggestion or recommendation was like, if you're going to enter into that universe, like Universe, Glory Road. And I think that's kind of where you see a lot of the rankings lists and stuff like this. Live, the Gillan Band live played the Japanese album the most, because I think there was a lot of tracks that carried over to Mr. Universe. Glory Road came in at number 2, Mr. Universe 3, Future Shock 4, Double Trouble 5. So right at the bottom of them representing that album live. Ian Gillan solo, like without the Gillan Band, but just doing his own solo shows. In terms of where the Gillan albums ranked, No Laughing Heaven was his most played Gillan song live, and then Untrain Your Brain, Bluesy Blue Sea, Puget Sound was 4th, and then Men of War from Double Trouble was tied with Second Sight from Mr. Universe. So cool. Even in his live solo stuff, Men of War kind of came in near the bottom of the list. In terms of singles, Restless charted 3rd highest out of the singles, with Trouble and New Orleans being the only higher charting single. Here's some user reviews, because I don't want to just rely on just like rankings lists and stuff like that. So here's a couple of user reviews. A mixed bag. The album is ultimately diluted because of its excessive length, even when some highlights exist, a bit too long for its own good, and the live material is not really exciting for different reasons. Nicely raucous live side is good by itself, but the meaningless flat studio side makes this a fairly tedious listen. So he went the other way with it. Another user review, the live album is abysmal. We already covered that. Another one, despite some great songs, this is overall one of Gillan's weakest albums. Nightmare in particular maybe being their worst song ever. The live record has rather lame sound quality. Here's a review from a critic. So Now Spinning's Phil Aston says, it sounded so polished compared with the Bernie Torme period of the band. I also thought it was a step backwards from where they were heading. There was almost a punk garage approach to the sound of the early Gillan albums. John McCoy's production style was not going to get the band much airplay in the USA, but in the UK, they were in tune with the rawness and accessibility of the new wave of British heavy metal. He also goes on. That's so
funny, because I think this is the rawest and most distorted and punkiest of all the albums in terms of sound. I think hands down, Future Shock sounds way better. I think even the Japanese album sounds pretty good. Mr. Universe, I think, sounds a little better, and I think Glory Road sounds a little better, and I think Magic sounds a little better. So,
I was going to ask you if you thought that was a fair assessment, but I was just going to mention that he calls Yannick Gers a Richie Blackmore clone as well, and says the live record was very
on this record, he's a Bernie Torme clone. I mean, it doesn't sound a lot different than what Bernie Torme would do, which is that noisy, garagey, squalling sort of sound. So I think he fits right in there, and I literally probably wouldn't even notice the difference had there not been liner notes, or I knew that there was a different guitarist. He's basically doing and he's not really much of a Richie Blackmore guy ever. He's not that way in Iron Maiden either. So I don't know.
So I would go with Mr. Universe just subjectively, because I do think it's, there's a lot of progressiveness. It's very heavy. Puget Sound is awesome. Secret of the Dance. The title track, Mr. Universe, you already mentioned, was one of your favorite Gillan tracks ever.
Yeah.
Glory Road's really cool. On the Rocks. Sleeping on the Job, there's good stuff on that as well. But I also did really like Double Trouble. I like the tracks on this one. Life Goes On, Born to Kill, I'll Rip Your Spine Out, like all great tracks. Like there was a lot of good instrumentation on this. The production was good. I didn't find that it was like weak, really, in many ways. I just kind of prefer Mr. Universe. And Mr. Universe, it's a great album. Ian Gillan himself said Fighting Man was the catalyst for the band even starting. He talks about Unchain Your Brain. I just want to go back to some of the stuff that he said. So he talks about Unchain Your Brain on Glory Road and says that's one of his favorite rock tracks of all time. He says it's just so fast. Richie Blackmore once said that writing a mid-tempo song is easy, but doing a fast one is hard. Well, it doesn't come much faster than this.
Okay.
But yeah, cool. I'd probably go with Mr. Universe of Glory Road, but I don't think you're too far off with Double Trouble. I thought it was a really good, enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been pretty close on this. I've probably said the odd time Mr. Universe is my favorite as well. But when I think about just the excitement and the identity of any one album, I just feel like it all came together here, where this is the album that has the most Gillan-ness quality to it, where it's like everything is focused into this weird idea of this. We're the punk Deep Purple with a little bit of Doors because of this mad genius we have for a keyboardist in Colin Towns. So. But yeah, there you go, everybody. I mean, let us know what you think in the comments below. What is the greatest Gillan album? And of course, we have a Patreon situation where Marco's been great with getting cool shows together with that. So if you want to join us on Patreon, we'd love the support. And that's it for now. Go play some of this Gillan stuff.
That's it, dude.